Today, we're diving into something pretty huge, the intense backlash that's been building around the hit show Stranger Things. We're going to break down the key arguments from a really detailed analysis that asks a pretty tough question. Has this cultural giant actually lost its way? So let's just start with the raw data, because the numbers really tell a story here. The source we're looking at points to this, well, pretty dramatic drop in audience scores on Rotten Tomatoes. At the start of the season, things were looking good. Scores were in the 70s. But then, after the second batch of episodes came out, that score plummeted to just 56%. Oof. So, what happened? What's really driving a drop like that? I mean, this was a show that was almost universally loved, right? Now it's facing this really divided reaction. The analysis we're exploring today lays out a few key arguments for why the show has, in its view, started to falter. And this quote, it really just nails the whole feeling. The argument is that after so many seasons, that initial magic, that incredible 80s nostalgia, it's starting to wear a little thin. And what's left are what some see as pretty significant flaws that are leading to some real viewer disappointment. Okay, so one of the biggest, most common criticisms that gets brought up is that the cast has just gotten way too big. It's what the source calls cast bloat. And that has led to a second, maybe even bigger problem, this feeling that there's no real danger for any of our heroes anymore. Let's dig into that first point a bit. The analysis suggests that with a cast this massive, there's just not enough screen time to go around. You can't give every character a meaningful story. So relationships and character arcs that should be the heart of the show feel rushed or underdeveloped just to make room for everybody else. And that leads right into this second issue. A huge point of frustration for a lot of fans is the show's refusal to kill off any main characters. The source argues this gives everyone plot armor, which basically sucks all the tension out of the room. I mean, if we know everyone's going to make it out alive, how can we really feel the fear when they're facing down a world-ending threat? But look, it's not all negative. The critique isn't saying the whole show is a wash. The analysis makes a point to single out a few characters that are still considered major fan favorites, characters that people are still rooting for. Dustin, Steve, and Hopper get the big shout-outs, and even a maybe for 11, which suggests some of that original magic is definitely still there. Now let's zero in on a very specific moment. The source we're examining identifies one single scene from this last season that became a total lightning rod for all this audience frustration. It really blew up online. And that scene is this conversation involving Will. Apparently, it took a whopping 12 hours to film. Now, for the show's critics, that's not just a fun fact. It's seen as a symbol of the show becoming kind of self-indulgent and maybe losing track of its storytelling priorities. Following that moment, the source directly questions Will's role in the larger story. The argument being made is that the scene, instead of empowering him, actually kind of undermined his potential to be a real heroic figure in the show's final battle. And the complaints about this one scene get really specific. The analysis lists a bunch of them, from it being the longest scene to write, to its overall tone, to the fact that Netflix actually promoted it with a whole making-of special. And critics saw that as more proof that the show was getting a little too proud of itself. Now, this is where the whole conversation gets way more complicated. The source claims that this specific scene has been used by some in the media as a kind of identity shield. The idea is that it's used to deflect any criticism of the show's quality by allegedly labeling any negative feedback as just bigotry instead of a legitimate critique of the writing. And that leads us to this really fascinating clash. It's not just about the show itself anymore, but about the words we use to describe negative reviews and what all of this means for fans and creators today. And wow, this slide just lays out the two sides of the argument so clearly. On one side, you have the term review bombing, which makes it sound like a coordinated, dishonest attack. But on the other side, the source argues this is just customer feedback, genuine reactions from a paying audience that wasn't happy. It's a huge disagreement on what fan criticism even is. So with all of this controversy and debate swirling around, the analysis turns to the big one, the final season. The question on everyone's mind is, can the show actually overcome all these criticisms and deliver a conclusion that satisfies people? The source seems to think it's going to be a really steep uphill battle. The source points to this quote from Noah Schnapp, the actor who plays Will, and calls it a major red flag. The argument is that he's not just managing expectations here. This is seen as a sign that the creators already know their ending is going to be divisive, suggesting they've made choices that a big chunk of the audience is probably going to hate. And that's where the comparison to the show Lost comes in, which, as you might remember, had one of the most divisive finales of all time. The worry is that Stranger Things, with its complicated lore and mythology, might be in the same boat, basically having to make up answers as they go to try and tie everything together.
So, what would a good ending look like from this critical point of view? Well, the analysis boils it down to three essential things. 1, explain all the mysteries. 2, make sure the villain, Vecna, gets a proper defeat. And 3, finally break that plot armor and have some real, meaningful character deaths.
And that's what it all comes down to, really. This whole explainer leaves us with this one big, provocative question. When it's all said and done, is Stranger Things going to be remembered as a beloved, game-changing classic? Or is it going to be a cautionary tale about a fantastic show that just couldn't quite stick the landing?